for tuning in as we kick off our codependency series. We're beginning that today. This is going to be a 3-part series. So today in part 1, we're going to talk about just generally about how to recognize codependency in our life and how that differs from healthy ways of being supportive and caring. And then in part 2, we'll talk about what's called high functioning codependency. I have a sense that many of you in the group will resonate with part 2. There are lots of different ways that codependency shows up in our life. But based on the poll that I put on this page that you guys voted on, thanks for all of you that did that, I have a feeling that the high functioning part of codependent behaviors is going to be something that a lot of you resonate with. So we'll do that next. And then in part 3, we're going to talk about how to shift out of codependent behaviors to become aware and to begin to heal those parts of ourselves that have been neglected for a long time, and how to kind of move out of this way of thinking and functioning. So before we kick off with part 1, I just want to do a quick reminder to check out the units section of our page. If you're new or if you're catching up and you're looking to start diving into a series that we've previously done, go to the units section on this group and everything's organized. It's all there for you, part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. So it's just kind of an easy way to go through the content. Also, feel free to invite friends to this page, and I'm also available for feedback or questions, whether you're on this live stream or you replay it afterwards. Feel free to comment, or you can also private message me. Okay? I got all kinds of things going on at my house today, so ignore any background noises. All right, let's get going. Okay, the term codependency is never anything I properly understood till very recently in my life. I had a general thought that it meant people who were needy or who really couldn't manage themselves well. In my own mind, I felt very confident and justified with the way that I was living my life, and I never would have associated myself with this term at all. Previously, before I started my healing journey, really about 4 years ago, I was a hard worker. I worked multiple jobs. I had good relationships, or so I thought. I was very involved in my church and even ran citywide events for nonprofits and organizations I was involved in. I was a busy lady. I prided myself as the person who would show up when others wouldn't, who would work longer when others would want to go home, and that I would, could always make things happen. At work, I always gravitated towards the important strategic leader. I felt that their cause was my cause, and that I would work hard to help implement their vision and become their biggest champion. That's who I was. I would work hard to offload their heavy tasks or responsibilities so that they would feel cared for and supported. All right? And part of that is good. But as you'll learn, not all of it is. At home, I was wearing all of the hats. Okay? My ex struggled with mental health and depression, along with lots of other issues. And I felt it was my job to take care of him while he healed and was struggling. I believed, this is really important, I believed that if I provided enough relief from the pressures and burdens he was experiencing, it would create space for him to get better. That's why I did what I did. But the harder I tried, the worse things got. And the more I did, the more unhealthy he became. One after one, all of the areas and relationships that I was trying to apply extra love and care became more destructive and more unhealthy. This still didn't faze me. I didn't stop and be like, well, why is this happening? I just was thinking, well, that's about them. I knew that my role was that I was committed, I was all in, and I was competent to do this type of help for the people in my lives. I was being Jesus to them, right? Isn't Jesus long-suffering, patient, kind, forgiving, keeps no records of wrongs, leaves the 99 for the one? These were all the things I told myself and things that my faith community would reaffirm that I was doing. In the eyes of myself and in the eyes of others, I was doing the right thing. I was being loyal. I was fighting for my marriage. I was putting other people's needs first. I was persevering. I was being a servant. I was championing a cause. I was loving the unlovable, and the list could go on and on and on. My identity was totally wrapped around this. People looking at me and saying, Jenny is the one that keeps going. Jenny is the one that keeps loving. Jenny is the one that doesn't give up. I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing. The thing I failed to see was I was doing all of these things completely at the expense of me. My health emotionally, physically, mentally, socially all came down crashing and burning. Life stopped. I stopped. And even when that happened, I was still confused, thinking, well, what went wrong? This was so unfair. All my efforts felt in vain. I had invested so much into other people, and still things didn't change for the better. What happened? I didn't know. This is still hard for me to talk about, to see how much I was living unaware of how much I was part of the problem, to see how much denial I was in, to see how much I was neglecting myself, to see how many lies I was believing about what was the right thing to do. I still feel grief when I talk about this. I still regret the years I wasted operating in a way that was actually accomplishing the opposite results of what I was desiring. If there's anything redemptive in all of this, it's that hopefully I can share something that will relate to one of you. Something that will spark a thought or an emotion that might help you consider changing the dance and putting yourself more into the equation of your life. You deserve to be cared for by yourself and by others. You deserve to be rested, healthy, whole, and at peace. Writing this class, I recognized how much I still tend to fall into codependent tendencies. It takes a lifetime to unravel from this way of thinking, and the key is to simply be aware. Am I doing this? Awareness is the tool that keeps us from falling back into patterns of toxicity. Okay? And you guys probably have different stories and situations than I do, but hopefully some of the general principles of this you'll resonate with. The topic of codependency is a layered one. We all have a touch of these behaviors, even if we're unaware of it. By nature, I put this on the page, women are, caring, nurturing, supportive beings. That's who we are. But hopefully, as you guys listen to this, you'll see the difference between caring and codependency, because there is a difference. All right, so let's start by talking about what are common misconceptions of codependency. And you may have your own. These are just a few that I thought of and that I know for sure I had. Okay, number one, codependency only exists in relationships involving addicts or abusers. All right, I feel like that's kind of like an older thought of codependency. This is not true. It can exist in every kind of person and relationship, including friendships, children, coworkers, employers, parents, and significant others who may not be addicted to substances or physically or verbally abusive. So it exists in all relationships. Second misconception, codependents are pushovers and show up in life as weak, needy, or incompetent. This was one of my misconceptions. Not true. In fact, most people I know with codependent behaviors, I would describe as strong-willed, highly competent, hard workers, and some would say they appear to be the superheroes of our world. They're the ones that look like they're out killing it half the time, okay? Misconception number 3, codependency is when two people are in a relationship are solely relying on one another to get their needs met. Okay, so it's like they're dependent on each other. This is how they get their needs met. That is also not true, and I'll explain why. All right, so let's unpack this. To get a feel for what these behaviors, if to get a feel for if you guys relate to any of these scenarios, just listen to this list because I'm about to kind of go through a bunch of things here. And some of you may be like, those are all me. And some of you may think, I resonated with a couple of those. But I would say that if there's any that resonate with you as I go through this list, then pay attention, because there may be some things that you've been unaware of that have been codependent tendencies. All right, so let me go through this. Do you advocate for your needs, or are you a person who is constantly rearranging yourself around what other people need? Okay, which way do you live your life? Are you always fixing things? Are you always giving your loved ones ideas of how their life could be better? Okay? Are you the one that always has like the solutions and the ideas and, hey, have you thought about trying this? Are other people's problems your problems? All right? If your partner comes home in a bad mood, does that kill your good mood? And or do you feel responsible to fix your partner's bad mood, even if it has nothing to do with you? All right? Do you truly only feel okay when everyone around you is okay? Do other people's stress become your stress? Do you tend to be the one cleaning up other people's messes? Do you feel frustrated because people in your life aren't changing? Do you tend to vent to people about other people's problems? Do you work harder than the other person to find solutions to their own problems? That's an important one. Do you continually make excuses for other people? When someone is hurting, needing, or struggling, do you feel compelled to do something about it? Do you change your plans, your schedule, or demeanor to accommodate someone's situation? Have you become a professional at walking on eggshells? Do you have a hard time letting someone be when they're struggling or failing? All right, almost wrapping this up here. Do you feel rejected when you don't feel needed in someone's life that you care about? Okay, I got 4 people live on here. Anyone resonate with any of those? I could probably put a check mark next to them all. Like I mentioned, by nature, women are caring, nurturing, and supportive. However, if we operate in these ways at the expense of our own well-being, we might have codependent tendencies. Okay? What about you? Is your loving, nurturing, helping coming at the expense of your own self-care? Do you regularly ask yourself, how am I doing? What are my needs? And are they being met? Sometimes as women, we don't even think to think like that. What am I really responsible for in this relationship, and what am I not responsible for? When we're operating in codependency, we just have this default to think, I need to do something. I'm responsible for this. I can help. I can fix. It's just what's natural for us. When we spend our lives making sure the people in our circle are okay, we will end up totally exhausted. All right? That will be the outcome. Okay, so kind of what I would say a definition of codependency, like I said, there's lots of layers and lots of legs to this, but a definition could be when someone has confusion regarding what belongs to someone else and what belongs to me. All right? So everything becomes mine. My problem, my mess, my burden in this other person's life. So their problem, their mess, their burden becomes my responsibility. And at the expense of what is truly mine, so my needs and my wants, get pushed to the side or not even a part of the equation. It is being overly sensitive and overly concerned about everyone's things at the expense of yourself. So you're hyper-focused on everyone else's growth, care, fill in the blank, again, at the expense of your own. Because of your high tolerance for denying your own needs, codependents tend to wait until they've experienced serious consequences before seeking the path of recovery. Unfortunately, I found this to be very true. Normally, people have some kind of crash and burn experience before they wake up and say, why is this not working? I'm trying so hard and this isn't working. So I hope that maybe at least one person in this group will start to consider maybe they've been operating in some of this before they have some kind of relational or health crisis. That's my hope. Okay, now I'm going to list other signs of codependent behaviors, and some of you may not initially relate to these. You may relate to the more high-functioning codependency that I'm going to talk about in part 2. I think that before I became aware to this in my life, like if you would have read this list to me, I would have been like, no, I don't do any of that. Like that's not me. However, I probably would have related to the high functioning list. And now that I know what I know, looking back, all of this resonates with me. But it really does take a journey of self-awareness to begin to go underneath the layers, because our bodies and our minds are made to survive. We do what's necessary to survive. And a lot of times, subconsciously, we are blocking emotions, thoughts, and feelings. And a lot of times underneath that is the codependent operating system that we can't identify right away, okay? But here's a list. Number 1, low self-esteem. All right, this can look like always comparing yourself to others. This can also look like not trusting yourself, not trusting your own opinions. You might have trouble taking compliments or criticism. You may discount your own feelings and needs and focus highly on needing other people's approval. Okay? Number 2, lack of boundaries, which, we've been talking about boundaries. So just in case you haven't heard the boundaries talk, lack of boundaries would look like no ability to say no and to factor yourself into the relationship. You may feel fearful, to set boundaries because you are so uneasy with upsetting another person. You may even struggle with the idea of a boundary or have confusion about what boundaries would look like in your life. Okay? Number 3, being reactive instead of responsive. Are you defensive? Can you listen instead of reacting to someone? If someone has a different opinion than yours, does it change your reality? All right, I want you to really think about that. Number 4, micromanaging behaviors. Okay, I still struggle with this, especially in quarantine. This is what you do to feel safe. You overmanage those around you to bind your own anxiety. This gives you the appearance that everything is okay. However, it's a coping mechanism. It doesn't actually work. All right, number 5, unhealthy communication. Are you afraid to be truthful because you don't want to upset the other person? All right, that's a common factor. And then lastly, number 6, no true sense of self. Do you have trouble identifying what your own needs are? Can you easily articulate your own life goals, aspirations, and desires apart from your relationships? So when you think about the things that you want for your life, when you think about what your future looks like, it's good to picture our loved ones in it, but is that the entirety of what it is? Do you individually have your own thoughts and aspirations and dreams for yourself? Okay, think about that. So you may have resonated with all of these, or you may have only resonated with one or none. Initially, when I was learning about myself and codependency, I don't think I would have checked many things on this list. I definitely would have more quickly identified with the high-functioning codependent characteristics we'll talk about in part 2. But now that I'm more aware, as I just mentioned, under the surface, I see that I had all of these indicators and signs at play in my life. I was just masking them with activity and the buzz of my codependency. It was like I was just, too fastly going to connect to that. In part 2, we'll talk about what it looks like to overfunction in codependency. We'll also talk about what it looks like to underfunction. So an overfunctioner is always paired with an underfunctioner. That is how the relationship works. And so we'll talk about that dynamic. You may find yourself in that dance. That's the term I use, the dance, the cycle. And in part 3, we'll talk about how to move out of codependent behaviors and begin to heal and operate in a healthier way. Okay, so stay tuned, and thanks for learning and being on the journey with me. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks, guys.